Welcome back, everyone, to the Stay Introverted podcast. I am your co-host, Jay Coleman,
And I'm your other co-host, Steph Laffy.
and
I am
as
Gabi.
always, oh, hold on, we'll go. Let's go into it. We have a guest. We have a guest. Go ahead and tell me who you are.
Hey, yeah. I sorry, it's a little glitchy, but I am Gabi Koyenov. I'm a licensed therapist based in Queens, New York, and I also have a podcast called the Gabi Koyenov Podcast, where I interview all kinds of amazing individuals. And I'm an extrovert, so it'll be interesting to have this conversation with
We
you all
see
today.
that.
Yes, that was very much apparent. 'Cause I couldn't even get the intro out, and here we go with the intro version. But you're from Queens, as am I, so it's all right.
Oh,
Nice. So it's okay. It's a saving grace.
Love it.
But yeah.
So Gabi, you and I actually met in person. We had a great conversation about introversion, extroversion, and everything in between. So I'm super excited for this conversation. But before we even get into it, why don't you tell us a little bit about the work that you do, whether on your podcast or just with your clients?
Yeah, on my podcast, at the time of this recording, I just released an episode with Trevor Aronson, who is this fascinating investigative journalist. He created the podcast American ISIS, which is a fascinating, riveting podcast. He also just recently released a different podcast about the Pulse nightclub shooting. I've had Dr. Justin Sledge of the YouTube channel Esoterica, where he does this incredible academic work on mysticism of all types of cultures. So it's really just this broad range of conversations. I like to tie it into mental health and self-help because I'm a therapist, but it's generally just whatever I'm interested in, whoever I can kind of get that I find interesting. We have an amazing conversation. Hopefully you guys will make a cameo on my podcast as well, which will be fun.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, that would be so fun. As a therapist, I started my private practice, which is called the Men's Therapy Studio. I work with women too, but I just want to niche up with the young adult market in general. And with men, I think more specifically, there's more of like a passion for me there to help young men navigate their place in this world and to get the mental health that they need, because I feel like it's a very for a long time, it's been a stigmatized thing for men to go get mental health. It's changing now, the perception, definitely. But it's where my heart is. So that's the crowd that I try to appeal to.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Obviously, I'm not a guy, so I can't really speak to it. But as a woman, I have noticed like the shift in the conversation with more and more men opening up about their mental health and what they struggle with and what they're feeling. And I think as a society, that's what we need. I think we need to remove that stigma. So thank you for your part in that.
Thank you for saying that. That's really sweet.
Yeah, most definitely. And I'm curious how you managed to land on that and decide like that, that's the group that you want to help. Because I agree wholeheartedly. When it comes to therapy and getting help for mental health, men have been, I don't know if left behind is the right phrase, but there's definitely been that stigma. And I guess, it's taboo, or it's seen as a weak and unmasculine for men to get the help that they need. But I'm definitely happy that the tide is turning. Steph notices I'm in my own journey with therapy. But I'm definitely curious how you found this to be your passion.
It's a great question. So for me, I wanted to be a therapist since I was in high school. I think I'm like one of those rare people that have known what they want to do for a very long time. So what kind of happened was I had this mentor who was my school counselor, and I got very close with him, and he really helped me turn my life around from, I guess, how much can a high school kid's life turn around? But he was very formative for me in developing my sense of confidence, the sense of just who I want to be as a person. And it was transformative. So like the first job that I got out of school was working as a school counselor as well, and I loved doing that. And just going through life as a young adult, figuring it out, I just realized it's so complicated. I think so many of us grow up with these messages of what we're supposed to do and who we're supposed to be, and it doesn't resonate with the individual. And I feel like so many of us are forced into boxes. That was my story coming up as a young adult to who I am now. I'm still a young adult, but you know, I've definitely found that like the way that I was brought up is not consistent with who I am. And I think like it's such a hard journey to navigate. And going through therapy myself obviously was really helpful, but understanding how a therapist is trained to help somebody safely go from one way of thinking to another way of thinking that is often more happy, more fulfilled, more in line with their ideals and values. So it's like recognizing that is meaningful. That's like the most meaningful thing that anyone could do. That's kind of how I came to that line of work and working with this population, because it's just so meaningful to be able to make that impact for that type of individual. So yeah.
Nice. I like what you said there. The way that you were raised is not consistent with who you are. I, th-
Yeah.
I think a lot of that can apply to a lot of people, men and women. But I also think that coming to that realization is hard. It was definitely hard for me, and then taking that next step, the next step being, okay, what now? What I do about it can be even harder. So I definitely think that's a very good way to put it. The way that I was raised is not consistent with who I am.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's tough. I think it's one of the hardest things people go through. Just realizing that it's like, okay, I don't, whatever. I don't even know how to express it any better, but it's like, um, we just grow up with all these messages, and it creates these stories in our head and these narratives, and it's one of the things that I think creates so much anxiety in life, where it's just like there's this story going on in your head that's not consistent with the reality that you're seeing, and it's a tough place to navigate. So it's just very meaningful for me to be able to offer a type of help to get people to navigate through the complexities of life.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we're also, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think I think we're also not really because I think I had sort of like an existential crisis during COVID where I was like, oh my God, like, I was turning 26 right when COVID started, which is around the time when a lot of people start to go, whoa, like, who am I? What do I want out of life? And I had all this extra time and space on my hand. So in my hand. So even though I had all this time and space, I think one of the hardest things for me, and I'm sure many of your clients, was finding the words to articulate who I really was and what I really stood for once I figured it out. That was like the hardest part. And not even just in terms of expressing myself and putting myself out there, but also finding ways to share how I think rather than like what my parents think
Mm.
without making them feel like it was commentary on how they raised me or without making them feel like rejected by my new paths and my new choices. I think a lot of the times it's very personal, I guess, when your kids start to like shift away from the way that you raised them. And that was definitely the source of a lot of tension between me and my family when I started to say, you know what, like you raised me this way, but like I want to go this way. Um, so I guess my question is like, how do you help your clients sort of navigate that conversation or that growing out of however they were raised as they step into who they're meant to be?
That's such a good question. And everyone is obviously different. The number one thing that I think anyone could do for anyone else is just the gift of listening. So for me, especially in therapy, understanding that everyone's different, I have to listen to my clients and understand where they're at. And some people are not even ready to have a conversation with their parents about they're different. Um, and I definitely think life is confusing when you're in that transition. So having a conversation at that time can be extra challenging because you're in transition. So it's like, how do you communicate that? I think once somebody has their life a little bit more clearly, it's much easier to sit down and have the conversation and be like, listen, mom, dad, mama, papa, um, this is how I'm living my life, and I'm so grateful for the way that you raised me, and I understand that you might be heartbroken because you tried to raise me to be a certain way, um, and it's like, this is the way that I'm living my life, and it's like, this is what I have to do for myself, and I understand if you might be upset, but this is who I am, and I think,
Right.
yeah, both realities are definitely true, where it's like the parent might be heartbroken because they tried to instill certain values on the kid that the kid might not have, but and they're going to be heartbroken over that, which is their right to be heartbroken, and it's also your right to live your life the authentic way that you see it. So, yeah, as long as you're not hurting anybody actively, I would say.
Yeah, and
If that
I
makes
feel
sense.
like, not you don't always need like such a formal like, hey, this is like sort of the direction. Like sometimes that's not even gonna happen, but how do like boundaries play a big role in this in
Mm.
these sorts of shifts?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, okay, so this is a great. There's an amazing book I would recommend anyone
Hmm.
to read called "Set Boundaries, Find Peace" by I forgot the author's name, but something Tawwab, I believe.
Hmm.
Rashida Tawwab, I think. It's an amazing book. I always believe in setting boundaries. I think it's very important to say if somebody's parents are trying to tell them, oh, you need to, let's say, go to church, for example, and church for some reason might be triggering to you. So it's like, or synagogue, whatever it is. So it's very important for you to be able to say like, okay, I don't go to these things, and that. Um, but it's just also, if somebody could get to the state where they're not being triggered by what their parents are saying, they can just hear them and love them, understand that these are their values. Perhaps they're not going to ever change their ways for whatever many reasons. It becomes much easier to sit there and accept them for who they are and love them for who they are, and then just yet be authentic to yourself. And if they're trying to force you, just set your boundaries peacefully, firmly, and that's it. No need to punish, no need to do anything like that. But it is a really important thing for sure to be able to set boundaries, and I highly recommend that book, Set Boundaries, Find Peace.
Nice.
I think I've been looking for a book about boundaries. I think that might be it.
It's a great book. It's
Oh,
on Audible too. I listened to the audiobook. It's
awesome.
great. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I definitely think I might need to get that as well. Because you're right. Uh, setting boundaries is definitely hard. Setting boundaries with the people who raised you is probably just short of of impossible, or at least that's how it feels. But yeah, it's definitely important.
It's so,
It's so important because on the one hand, it's understandable because um, your parents will. It doesn't matter how old you get. Your parents, you're always going to be their child. Um, like
right.
that's never going to change. But what has changed is that you are not a literal child, and I think a lot
Mm.
of parents don't. They just for some reason it doesn't connect. Like it doesn't connect. They're always in dad mode or mom mode, and like they're always seeing things where they can try to help or guide you. And it's like, at some point you have to step back and let someone succeed or fail on their own, or just live their life. And then it's hard for us to as children to say that, but I'm sure it's hard for parents to hear that and digest that.
It's
Um,
yeah.
my speaking from experience, my mom is going through that right now. I'm 40 years old, but I will always be her baby. But it's definitely a lot of tug and pull, a lot of back and forth. So, but you're right. It's very important to establish and maintain and uphold boundaries.
It's so important. And I mean, to your point as well, we kind of get into these roles and we identify with these roles. And it's like, for your parents, it's true too. They identify as being that person that has always guided you, protecting you from harm, trying to do the right thing for you. And now that you're an adult, they still are operating in that role, and it's hard for them to detach and think like, okay, he's an adult now. Let Jay do what he's gonna do because he knows what's best for him. They still think they know what's best for you, and they always will. That's like, it's probably not going to change. And that is what makes it tough. That's what makes it so hard to have these boundary setting conversations as well, because at the same time, you know, they know all your trigger points, and they know exactly like the thing that they're going to say that, you know, you kind of get like bugged out about. So it's very hard to just maturely come to this conversation and say the things that you need to say, because it's like it's so easy to get triggered as well.
It definitely is. And I don't know if Steph, let me know if this kind of applies to you, but sometimes it feels I think to our parents when we don't, do the things that they expect us to do, or we try to go our own way, or we want to live a lifestyle, I guess, that they're not used to, they kind of look at it as a failing on their part. Like I got
Oh my
like I
God.
literally had I literally had my mama say I failed as a mother, and I'm like, no, I'm just living my life. But
Right. Oh,
oh,
100%.
okay,
Literally.
so
Like,
it's not just me.
Of course
Okay.
no,
not. You're not alone.
it's, yeah, I mean, the number of times just in the last 6 months that I've had this conversation with not just my parents, but also my mother-in-law, who is like, so now it's like a double whammy. It's like every time we do something as a couple, that maybe my parents are okay with it, and I don't have to have that conversation, but my mother-in-law is like, that's not how I raised my son, blah blah blah, like I failed him. So now it's like a double whammy, which is a lot.
Mm,
um
tough, yeah.
I remember when we got our puppy, she was furious, like did not talk to us for two
I'm
weeks
so
Why?
um
I'm sorry. Hold
because
on.
we already had
We're not just going to walk past that. Like what how, who's mad
she
who's mad at puppies?
she was she was not told. I understood her point and her
Mm-hmm.
perspective. The reason was that we already had a puppy, we already had Meatball,
Mm-hmm.
and so when we got Gnocchi, she was just like, you know, you guys have paid thousands of dollars for emergency vet bills because it's a Frenchie and Frenchies have a lot of problems. Like, are you really in a position to like be able to, if Noki also has breathing problems or has back problems, like, number one, are you going to be able to cover it, which is fair. But again, we're 30, so we'll figure it out. But then the other issue too was that she always babysits Meatball when we go away. So now she was like,
Mm,
now you're gonna dump two dogs on me? Like, that's not
mm,
fair to me.
right.
So she had valid points. And there was a couple other things too. Like, our apartment is really
Mm-hmm.
small. Um, so that was a lot. She was just concerned, like, we were finally getting into good, like, cleaning and organizing habits after years of, like, struggling with that. So she was just like, is adding a puppy really going to, like, is it going to set you back?
Mm.
So she had valid points, but it was just like, okay, like, I get where you're coming from, but, like, we've always wanted two dogs. So,
Mm.
Okay. So yeah, some fairness. Yeah,
yeah.
I didn't get the whole like not talking to us for a couple of weeks. That just seemed kind of extreme to me.
It
Yeah.
was a little intense, but we're good now. Now she loves the puppy. So how could you not? He's so cute.
So cute.
Noki and Meeple are awesome.
Yeah, they are friends of
Friends
the
of the
show.
show, always.
But yeah, I mean, like, just like to your point, Jay, like, there's so many examples I can think of where, like, even the example that I shared a few moments ago about how we used to struggle with organizing and keeping our space clean. Like, it's still something that we struggle with. It's like, I like, it's something that takes a lot of effort on our part. Like, it's not, I'm not a clean freak by any stretch of the imagination. I'm the opposite. So I have to put a lot of effort and focus and concentration into making sure that my space is something that I'm proud of. And so both my parents and my mother-in-law often have called it a failure on their part. Like, they're like, where did we go wrong? And I don't know. You didn't really go wrong. It's just that's how we are and that's how you are.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Exactly. I mean, I think it also helps for parents if they see you doing well, that'll help them just feel like, okay, maybe I don't understand this whole podcast thing, but it's whatever, it's doing okay, or other businesses or whatever that they didn't necessarily see as an option for you. But if you're doing okay financially, that does help a lot. Yeah.
oh, absolutely. Like I feel like if you're doing financially well, if you're like, in good business, like if you've got things going on that are working for you, it's a lot harder for them to have something to say. I feel like,
Right.
Most definitely.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Right.
At least plus for me.
but like if your life is falling apart, like,
Yeah.
It's funny. I started doing YouTube videos a few years ago. At first, it's like it's kind of weird, your parents are seeing you on the internet. It's like it's strange to just put all that stuff out there, but it's not even like the YouTube channel is doing well. It's kind of not, but my parents like love it. For
oh
some whatever
wow.
reason,
Nice.
yeah, they've turned around on it. Yeah, it's very funny.
Do you ever get like uncomfortable, like, oh, they're listening, maybe I shouldn't say that, or maybe I should edit that out?
No, not really, not really.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking like maybe I should edit the part out about the dog and the cleaning because I'm pretty sure they all listen.
I
that's funny.
used to feel that way. One, with the podcast, but also with really any sort of like personal sort of content that I would put out, whether it be a blog post, reel, or whatever. Anything that kind of told my story, I kind of felt worried because I always felt there's that mugly presence looking over you. But I got out of that real quick because I'm like, at the end of the day, I gotta tell my story. Also,
Right.
I'm a grown ass man, so she's just like, it's like I think you kind of have to get to that point, like it's like you're a grown ass man or woman, and it's like you know it's a lot less of me asking you and a lot more of me telling you, and I think one getting to that space is hard, but also I think receiving that from your child is hard, but um to both of your points, that's kind of one of the boundaries that I've set, whereas like I'm not asking you, like I'm telling you this is what's happening.
Yeah,
You can roll with it or not, but again, I'm a grown ass man, and it may work out, it may not. But um, yeah, I just I stopped, not so much stop caring, but stop worrying about um, parental eyes on my stuff a long time ago.
yeah. No, it's a great place to get to, and I think that's like it's the real sign of being an adult when you're finally have that realization of like you're the one in charge making all the decisions. And I feel like I don't know if this is just this generation or it's always been like this, but I think most of us walk around at 18, 19, 20, even like whatever, most of our early 20s, maybe even all of our 20s, still thinking we're kids in a sense. Like we're beholden to what our parents think, what society thinks, this, that. Like you're the ones making the rules now, you're the ones that are the adults. And that's what it is. And you're not really an adult until you can realize that, like, yeah, you're the one responsible for yourself. Nobody else is going to be there to tell you, like, you don't need permission, you don't need forgiveness, like, to live your life, you know so yeah.
I really struggled with that in my 20s because I feel like it was so hard to break out of like that, like, I'm still a kid
Right.
mentality.
Yeah.
Especially because, and Gabby, I think you and I, you're Jewish too, right?
Yeah, I'm Josh.
So part of, as a Jewish girl, like I, at least in my family, like I had the like your typical like mom who like babied the hell out of me as well as my siblings. Like that, it was, kind of stereotypical. And that was, I think that also probably played into it because every time I would say like, I'm an adult, she'd be like, you're still my kid. Like she didn't want
Mm.
me to be an adult. So it was like this very much this push and pull. And I feel like by the time I reached my 30th birthday, we were both kind of getting into the point where we were both ready to agree that yes, I am an adult. But until my 30th birthday, like, I feel like it was just it was a push and pull.
It's so yeah, it is. It is. It's so tough. And like I was saying earlier, your parents are never going to change their mind about you being their baby. Like I remember even I moved out of my parents' house when I was 17 because I went to school a year earlier, so I graduated 17, and I was basically like dorming for the first couple of years. And that was hugely helpful in creating this gap where I was able to like discover myself. And I'm very much like I very much don't understand how people that don't have that opportunity do it. You know, it's so tough to like go out in the like if you're always with your parents and always have that relationship where like they're constantly telling you what to do, constantly babying you, and that's just the expected norm. It becomes even more hard to break out of that mold. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Definitely. I mean,
That's like yes,
moving
to say.
out.
no,
Oh, go ahead, Jay.
I think that's
Yes,
exactly
to say.
no, I
Oh,
think
sorry,
that's
Jay. Yeah.
exactly it. It's like, you know, you know, I'm not a parent, but as a parent, I think, you know, your job is, or at least you want to protect your kid from harm. You want to make sure they're not in any danger. You want to give them everything that you didn't have. But I think sometimes you kind of forget to give them the things that you did have. You know, I think, you know, it is, again, my opinion, it's ultimately your job as a parent to prepare your children for life without you. And that entails preparing them for a life without you. Like, you know, you have to, you know, steadily give them uh, more leeway and more roads to move. You it sounds counterintuitive, but you kind of have to let them fail in some things. Like you have to let them experience things not working out, or them not getting what they want, or things going wrong. I think it's better if it happens when they kind of have that safety net of a parent to say, hey, you know what, this went wrong. You might want to learn from this, as opposed to them turning 18, having never failed at anything, having never even been in any sort of position where they might fail, and then having to fail for the first time as an adult, and mommy and daddy can't swoop in and save you. And now what happened? So it's definitely you know, it's a position that I would imagine it's impossible, because like again, you want to protect them as much as you can, but you also kind of have to let them live life a little bit. So it's like where is it where is that
Yeah.
line? You're never going to get it right. But I do think sometimes our parents do lose sight of that. You know, they're always, because
Yeah.
it's true, they do know what's best for us to a certain degree. They've been down that road, so they can tell us, you know, what might happen. But at the same time, there are times where you kind of have to just let people experience it. Like you have to let people live their lives. It may turn out differently. You know, times change, technology changes. Um, we may have the same choice, but if there may be 101 different factors going into that choice, so it may come out differently. We don't know, but I've definitely encountered that growing up, where it's like, you know, like Steph said, that push and pull. It's like, you know, you have you got to let me go. Like I can't be kiddo at age 30. It's not going to work. You know.
Yeah. You know, I'll tell you, I'm a recent father. My daughter just turned 5 months, and
Oh, nice.
this reminds like this whole conversation kind of reminds me of this philosophical conversation I've been having with a friend. Um, it's very strange, you know, as a teenager coming up, you see adults that I don't know, it's this strange thought where it's like they're kind of just like in this rat race, right? Where they do their job and then they come home, and it's kind of like we fall into these routines, these habits, and these patterns. And you always like have this feeling like growing up, it's like, why don't adults understand what it's like to be a kid? Like, how do you forget that stage of like the childhood, the curiosity, being able to just play and laugh and cry and then get back up and forgive the next day. Like there's a certain like rigidity to adulthood that like almost seems like they're like adults are so alien to us when we're kids. Right. And I have my daughter now, and it's so crazy to me. Like I try to be like cognizant of like what was I like when I was growing up, and what are the things that I need to do for her development. And it's like it's almost like a scary thing where it's like, am I going to fall into these like robotic patterns that I saw all the adults in my life when I was a kid have? And it's so strange, and it's a weird experience just growing up and being alive. You know.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean that is so wild to think about. And like as my husband and I are like preparing to bring a baby into this world in the next like couple years, that's I'm almost wondering if the conversations that we're having now as a society will keep us from getting to that point, because I feel like these types of conversations, I don't know, I mean they were definitely happening, like all throughout history, but I don't know if they were as mainstream, and I feel like they were maybe happening behind closed doors. Nobody was talking about mental health, nobody was talking about the parent child relationship, but like these were not, at least to my knowledge, conversations that my parents were really having with their friends, like while they were having wine night. But
Right.
I feel like this is such a more common conversation that people are having, so maybe we're less at risk for becoming those like super alien adults to our
Right.
kids.
Maybe.
So I'll tell you, you're right. Yeah, I personally think we're evolving as a society, but like what scares me at the same time, there are so many things that my parents had and previous generations had that like seems to be lacking. Like, I'll just give you an example from my parents. My parents are immigrants they came from Uzbekistan, and they came to this country in their 30s. They didn't know the language or anything. And it's like they've made it as far as like the American dream goes. They were able to buy property, they were able to be like relatively successful, and stable in this country, and it blows my mind. It's like the level that they had to work, like when they came here nonstop, just working, saving money, having kids, raising kids. I cannot do
It's
that. Like it's
amazing.
not. Yeah,
No.
it's literally it blows my mind that they were able to do it, and I do not have anywhere
Mm.
near their mental strength and fortitude and like ability to for all the things that they did. It really blows my mind. So it's like on the
Right.
one hand, it's like I do think that there are definitely things that I have just growing up in America. Having access to YouTube, to podcasts, to high level information that just didn't exist back then. Like it's turned me into a very different type of person from my parents. But like and in many many good ways, but also like in some ways it's like, how did they have this mental toughness and like this ability to just persevere through anything? It's
It's
crazy, blows my mind.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Right.
That adds like a whole new layer. Like,
Right.
yeah, like
Yeah.
I always think, I mean, I'm like third generation, or I think maybe even fourth. Um, but but like back in the early 1900s, when my great grandparents came here from Russia, Poland, like they were farmers and they didn't speak the language and they didn't have the internet or like really
Right.
any resources. So how did they all do it?
I don't know.
I don't
It's
know if that grit was
Yeah.
lost in a generation. I don't
I have
know.
no clue. It's such a good question to like. I don't know if there's like studies on this or something. But I personally do believe that mental health was always a struggle throughout all the generations. I think that this is kind of a hot take, and maybe research doesn't back me up, but I do think that we're mentally healthier today than we were in past generations, because I think we talk about it more, we address it more. Like I do think, hearing my parents talk about like their parents and all that, like there was depression and anxiety and all that stuff. It definitely existed. Um, Perhaps they had different coping mechanisms back then, and perhaps they were working so hard that they didn't get the chance to think about it. But like, I do definitely think that we have more awareness and there's more mental health in today's day and age than there was in the past. It's kind of a hot take. I forgot where I was going with that point. But
You know,
yeah.
one, I agree with you. As far as mental health, I don't know if it's necessarily a hot take, just from the standpoint that I think that it's when the rent's due, when you're raising a family, when you know that if you don't do this thing, you and your family are out on the street, or you and your family are not going to have food, or you and your family are not going to have heat. Yeah, I might be feeling sad and depressed, but I kind of got to move on. I got to keep going. I can't really worry about that shit right now. And you're right. It's
Right,
always
right.
been there. But I also think that our parents and our grandparents and our great grandparents, there was kind of this understanding that you just deal with it because this thing has to get done. This job has to get done. These
Yeah,
kids have to get you have to get raised. This food has to get cooked. And going back to going back to men, talking about your mental health is talking about being depressed is not manly. Walk it off, rub some dirt on it, all that stuff. I do think that women
right.
definitely talk more than we did growing up. Again, not publicly because as men we kind of we suppress women because that's what we do. But I do think that women talked about it amongst themselves a lot more than men talked about it in general. But you're right. I do think that as we advance as a society, um, you know, I'm a lot better off than my mom was. She's a lot better off than her mom was. So I think as those things kind of fall into place, I think you have more time and more bandwidth to be able to say, hey, you know what, I'm feeling kind of today. Let me talk about it. I can go to therapy because I'm in a position where I had a good foundation, so I don't have to worry about struggling to make ends meet or struggling, to get a job or put food on the table. My mom, again, I'm not that more advanced, but my mom had a little bit more struggle than I did. I had her parents had more struggle than she did. So I think that plays a part in it. I don't think it's the entire piece, but I do think just each generation kind of making it a little bit better for future generations helps because not
Yeah,
because it kind of frees it. And I'm probably saying it very very generally, but it kind of frees up that bandwidth to now say, hey, let's talk about these things that are bothering us now. It's okay to not be okay. It doesn't make you less of a man, or it doesn't make you uh, a brat, or overreacting to say, hey, I'm depressed, or hey, I feel like this isn't a good day. But I also think that not having certain obstacles in your way that you got to face does help.
hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely, for sure.
I mean, I always say, one of my friends and I always say, like, our parents' ceiling is our floor. So, like,
Hmm.
I
where
like that.
they, as high as they were able to get, like, now we get to just build on that and make them proud. And they've done their job to the point where I
Yeah,
can take it from
I like
here.
that.
That's so deep. Yeah,
Yeah, I didn't make it up. I don't know where. I think maybe we
It's
posted
yours,
that on
Steph. It's
Instagram
yours.
somewhere
It's
and just
yours.
talked about
It's yours. It's all
it.
right. It's yours.
Oh my
it's a
god.
genius quote, Steph.
It's
Oh,
genius. It's
Thank
genius.
you.
Take credit for it.
yeah,
Because I was like, yeah, it's mine. So it's all you. It's all yours, Steph. Good. Yes. Steph with the word of the
yeah. That
day.
reminds me of, yeah. It's in the office. There's this scene of like a quote like, "You miss every shot you don't take," like quoting Michael Jordan, quoting Michael Scott. Michael Scott.
Oh, that's so
Like he
funny.
steals the quote. Yeah,
But
yeah.
I will say this about our parents, and it's funny because we spent almost an hour talking about parents and nothing about like introversion and extroversion. So this is basically been a 45-minute tangent, which I love because we love tangents around here. But I will say this about our parents. One thing that they did get right was naps. I loved naps. When I was younger, I hated going to sleep. I wanted to stay up all the time. I hated naps. I love sleep. As a 40-year-old, I love sleep. So I will say that is one thing
Yeah.
that our parents got right is just naps because I love me a good nap. So I just want to say,
Yeah.
Mom, you were right.
I'm curious. Yeah, I think also it's important for us to realize that our parents did the best that they knew that they could. Not to say that they always did everything right, but like just to have that grace to realize that like they really tried their best in a sense. Um, I think that could give a lot of people peace. It's kind of cliche because sometimes we don't want to believe it if we're angry about what parents have done to us throughout the years. But it's like, yeah, they've tried, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's so true. I mean, like, Mom, if you're listening, if you've made it this far without hanging up and calling me an angry rant, texting me, like, you don't think I did a good? Just kidding. I love you, Mom.
Yeah.
I do love you, Mom, and you did a great job. I agree.
Yes. Your Steph's mom. Yeah, I'm sure you're proud of how amazing Steph is and her brilliant quotes as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, she's like, where do you come up with this shit?
It's like, yeah. So tell me, I'm very
And
curious to
Dad
hear about.
too, if you're listening.
Uh,
What
I'm
was
curious to hear
that?
about this podcast. Like, it's about introversion.
Yeah, so it's not even really necessary. Like, it's not like we sit here like quoting Carl Jung. Like, I mean, we could, but like that would be boring. No offense to anybody who does that.
Yeah.
Um, but it's more of a space for us as introverts to just have conversations from our perspectives, about like things that we think are important, or things that we think are funny, or things that we think are interesting.
Yeah.
And occasionally we bring, or pretty often at this stage, we bring on guests like yourself, to sort of add a little bit of color to the conversation. So
Interesting.
a lot of content online, like specifically in the introverted niche, which I didn't know was a thing until a couple years ago.
Mm.
A lot of the content is geared towards like fixing being an introvert, like how to like survive life as an introvert. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but like Jay and I both, through our different experiences, have found that like you don't need to survive introversion, you just celebrate it.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Fascinating. I have so
So
many
it's all about
questions. Yes.
staying
Oh,
introverted.
please.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
What do you think are some of the things that you wish extroverts understood about introverts?
Uh,
We're not
go
all
ahead, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. Please, please.
go ahead. Oh, so many things. So we're not all, I mean, I'm socially awkward, but
Mm,
not all of us are socially awkward.
okay.
And I'm not socially awkward all the time. It's just like when I'm not in the mood. That's one thing. I'm not always shy.
Mm,
Um, I'm not like, it's not like I sit home all day and like stare at the wall. Like, I have friends, I go out, I love to do the things that extroverted people love to do. I just need
mm,
time to like recharge, and I need a little more time than typical extroverts do. And when I don't, and it's very scary.
Yeah,
mm,
I would say one, it's not that we don't necessarily want to talk or that we dislike talking. It's that we don't like talk. Most of us don't like talking for the sake of talking. We get social norms. We get being courteous, but at the same time, we're not fans of small talk because it we gain our energy typically by being alone or by doing things that we use to recharge. We don't necessarily gain energy by a lot of social interaction. It drains our energy. So for us, small talk is kind of like empty calories. We need an actual meal if we're going to be here. We'll talk your ear off if we hit the right
Nice.
topic. Like again, Steph and I have a podcast and we talk about pretty much anything and everything. I say this all the time. If you start talking about R&B from the '90s or basketball or buffalo wings, I'm your guy. That's a 5 hour conversation. But I don't care. I don't care about the weather. I don't care about your son. Uh, not, not your kids. Your
Nice.
kids, you're just fine, Gabby. But in general, right?
of course.
Yeah, you're just fine.
Yeah, you'd love to hear about
But little Timmy's baseball game, I don't give a shit. I'm curious. I'm curious how he feels about learning the game and how hard it is. But him actually playing, I don't really care. And it's hard for us sometimes to say that in a way that doesn't come across rude or comes across as aloof or just comes across as being an asshole. But it's not, so a lot of times we'll just not even engage or we'll just remove ourselves from the situation, which kind of leads people to think they're assholes also. But it's just, we
Yeah.
introverts have a pretty clear understanding of who they are, I think, and understand that they necessarily don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I'm probably speaking a lot more from my experience in that I've walked away from so many conversations or so many situations because I just knew how it was going to go, and I'd rather just walk away than take a chance and hurt someone's feelings. But at the same time, I've gotten into trouble doing that, and I'm like, trust me, it's better this way. But but it hasn't been taken away. So I do wish extroverts would realize that, um, and also that if you actually give us a couple of minutes to kind of warm up, we're cool. It's kind of like turning your car on in the winter. You can't just get in and drive. Let it warm up a little bit. Let it marinate, and then come back to us, and then we should be fine. But we will leave early, so there's that.
100%.
And always have food. This is introvert pro tip. I'll probably get in trouble for saying this. If there's food there, we'll probably be there. But again, we're gonna leave early with a plate. I don't make the rules. I just work here. Pretty much.
Pretty much. Gabby, what are some things that like you've always thought about introverts that maybe we dispelled here, and then we'll kind of start to wrap up?
Yeah, some things I've always thought about introverts.
Yeah, like what have you like coming onto this podcast? Like, do you think it was gonna be like a certain type of like I don't know?
Yeah.
Have you ever like I don't know?
No, that's funny. My best friend, one of my best friends, he is like a hardcore introvert. He's been my moral compass since we were in high school. He's always like challenged me, and he always like says what he believes. He's a really cool dude. But he's like massively, massively introverted. Like he just wants to stay at home and read a book every day of his life. That's like his vibe. But he basically, yeah, it's like, I don't know. So the thing about introverts, everyone's different, and not just introvert, extrovert. I think it's like, it's so funny. He would even like argue with me with him being called an introvert because he doesn't like labels either. But I don't know. Yeah, what are some of the things I've always thought about introverts? I think everyone's cool. I think like what Jay said, there's so much more behind the first impression, and it's so easy to get seduced by first impression, and it's not always accurate. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, whatever. But we often fall for that, and I think also it seems to me that it's harder to be in society like the way it's structured currently as an introvert. Because it's so like everything is about like the flash and the persona and optics and everything, and it's like it seems to me that like it is just a little unfortunate that if you're introverted, it seems a little bit harder. That's what I think. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but yeah. How do you guys feel about
no,
that?
you're totally right.
Yeah.
Like I feel like you're always expected to show up, and then when you show up, you're always expected to just be on and happy and energetic and like excited to see everybody, and like the second somebody talks to you, you're supposed to be like, oh my god, hi, like that's not
Yeah,
me.
exactly.
Like I could do that like maybe once a week. But like I struggled with like going to the office 5 days a week, like when that was a thing back in 2019, like having to put myself together, and then anytime somebody came by my desk, having to like engage in a conversation and ask about their dog and ask about their kid and like it was challenging as an
It's very
introvert.
draining.
So
Yeah.
now it's so nice to be able to have the hybrid schedule and like go in once or twice a week and
Yeah.
sit in a meeting room and I don't feel like talking to people because they're all empty now. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Can I
But
add
I know
something?
that we have to wrap. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No problem. I also, as a person, I hate small talk. I can't stand small talk. Um, there are certain things that I try to do, like to just be curious. I'm curious about people, so it's like interesting to me to hear sometimes like what other people find interesting. But I do this so often, and it's kind of awkward. I just ask people really personal questions sometimes. Um, it's not like too socially off, but it's like I do this also. I'm a therapist, so I'm a little too used to like asking people personal questions. Um, but it's very funny, and I find that that might be like a helpful tool. Like I don't care to hear small talk, so I just ask people like what am I actually curious about? If I could ask them like something, what would I ask them? You know, it's a fine line. Yeah, sorry. What were you gonna say, Steph?
No, that's really funny. I feel like next time I go in an elevator, I'm gonna be like, so what do you think about do you think society's falling apart?
It's funny. I will literally do that sometimes. I'll like just
I
get into
love
it.
that. I'm gonna try
Yeah,
that and like torture
yeah.
people. Um,
It's so funny.
but anyway, I know that you've got another commitment, so let's wrap it up really quick. Gabby, if you want to quickly just share where people can find you.
Yeah.
Yeah, go
Sure,
ahead.
Gabi Koyenov on YouTube and Journey with Gabi on Instagram. And then, yeah, the podcast is on YouTube and Spotify. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, you'll find the Gabi Koyenov podcast.
Awesome. We will link all of that in the show notes.
Thank you so
And
much.
we just want to quickly say thank you so much for listening to the Stay Introverted podcast. Be sure to subscribe on all of the podcasting platforms. We're also now on YouTube and on TikTok, so go follow us there. And don't forget to rate and leave us a 5-star. I always do this. Don't forget to review and leave us a 5-star rating.
All right, everyone.
And we'll see you next week.
Thank you. Here.